Hello everyone, welcome back to our web series. So in this video we will discuss about the F5 web working mechanism, which works in a full proxy architecture with destination net. So in this series we will be discussing about the workflow of the request and the response on F5 and how it exactly works, how the client are unaware about the fact that the whole process has been load balanced and the was request was processed and the response was provided to the client without any interruption of the whole process. So suppose there is a client called robot which is connected on the external network 192.168.1.0 network, which is an external. So we have the IP of robot 192.168.1.110. So we have IP 192.168.1.110. So this is the IP of robot. This is the client connected to the external network and the source. So when it initiates the request, it goes to the F5 IP of lines, and after the successful three-way handshake between the robot and the F5 Wi-Fi appliance, the request is directed to the virtual server, which is 192.168.1.180. So source IP will be 192.168.1.110, and the source port will be a random generated port. We will take consideration of 1040, and the destination IP will be the virtual server IP of F5 appliance 192.168.1.180, whereas the destination port will be the HTTP port, since the destination server is using the HTTP service. So in this case the destination port will be 80. So now when the F5 receives the request with the following information about the destination, which is which will be on this side of F5. Then now the F5 IP will forward the request to the backend server. It will, through its algorithm, it will load balanced among the three web server and forwards the request to the suitable server. So we will take the server to process the request S1 server. So now what will happen is that the source IP will be the real source IP will be the robot real IP 192.168.1.110. The source port will be the same port used by the robot to initiate the request 10.40, and now the destination IP will be replaced with the real server IP, that is 10.200.15.100, and the destination port will be the same 80. Now the F5 has forwarded the request to the destination web server S1. It receives the packets and it receives the request and process them. Now it needs to respond the request. So if in F5 in terms of routing also, it needs a gateway, default gateway, to forward the frame to the destination request, or the one who initiate the request. So in this case in F5 we have .120, which is the self IP of F5. Through .120 IP it will forward the frame to the network where the client resides. So now the source IP will be 10.200.15.100 and the source port will be the 80. Now the destination IP will be the robot, the client who initiate the request, 192.168.1.110, and the destination port will be the same port used by the robot to initiate the request, 1040. So it will send the frame of the following information to the F5, and the F5 what it does is that F5 replaces the source IP with its VS server IP, virtual server IP, that is 192.168.1.180, and the source port will be the same port 80, whereas the destination IP will be the robot client IP 192.168.1.110, and the destination port will be 4.10.40. So in this way the packet flows from the client to the required web server, where F5 load balances the request and forwards the request to the appropriate web server, and after the request has been processed, the response is forwarded to the network where the host resides or the sender resides through the self IP of F5, which we can also consider as the default gateway between the two network, the server and the external or the client side network. So after the process, backend server forwards the frame from its with carrying its source IP 10.200.15.100 to the destination IP, that is a robot 192.168.1.110. So in this way the whole proxy architecture of the web with destination net works. So on our next web series we will demonstrate practically about the full proxy architecture with destination net on F5 web by capturing the appropriate packet in through 4 different processes. So first one we will be capturing from the robot or the client initiating the request to the F5, and the second will be capturing from the F5 web backend, where it will forward its REST request frame to the backend server. Then third will be the backend server sending the response back to the initiator, and the last one will be the client receiving the final response. So this is all for this series, and we will demonstrate the practical on our next web series. Thank you.